Oh no, May, are you making another video about a children's book? What is it? A children's book channel? Yeah, this is another one of my favorite childhood books, and the reason why I'm making all these videos, it is because these books make me happy. And I am really clasping at the things that are making me happy nowadays, because very few things make me happy, because I see the war, the devastation happening all over the world, and I don't feel very happy. But I do give myself a little bit of respite every now and again by looking through my childhood books. Another one that I found that I actually lost a copy of. My childhood copy got completely ruined. It got ripped and all the pages fell out. So I saw this one in a used bookshop, and I was just... And again, I was nostalgic for my childhood, and I picked it up. And again, I spent hours looking at illustrations, because being a child, I really would focus on little illustrations. That is very common for neurodivergent children. And of course, all children love illustrations. But this one has 3 stories, and one is by Rudyard Kipling. Not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he was a UK author who was born in India. And it's The Jungle Book, but we called it Mowgli. That's what it says here. It is a Russian way of saying Mowgli. We pronounce it as Mowgli in Russian. So the next one in this book is Carlson, and it was written by Astrid Lindgren from Sweden. Again, I'm not pronouncing her name correctly. And the last one is by Alan Alexander Milne, which is Winnie the Pooh. So this was international literature. This book was published in 1985. And the illustrations, let me tell you, we actually had a cartoon, and this cartoon was created in this style. And I want you to really look at it, because it is so amazing. I love the style. I think there is something very special. I remember being a child and just staring at those little paws that these little wolves have, and all of these, muscles. All of this detail really fascinated me when I was a child. And I will show you a few of these illustrations. I know in the past video I kind of rushed through those illustrations, and they were a little bit hard to see because of this bright light that I have right in front. Oh, just look at this. It is so pretty. I remember just admiring all of this detail, the claws, these muscles. You can almost see them move. You can feel the breeze lifting up this little curtain. So when I was a child, when I was 6 years old, my grandfather asked me whether I was excited for school, because I was about to start school. And I said no. And I said that I didn't want to go to school. And he asked me what I was going to do instead. And I said, I want to live in the woods like Mowgli. And my grandfather remembered these words of mine for the rest of his life. He kept on reminding me, remember when you were little, you wanted to live in the woods like Mowgli? And I mean, I still kind of do. I understand, of course, that I'm not going to be able to survive if I live in the woods, because I was not born in the woods. But just as I told you before, there is a Soviet cartoon that is based on Mowgli. And this is the scene that never failed to make me cry. This is when Akela was about to die. And every time I watched that cartoon or read that book or looked at this illustration, I would just start bawling my freaking eyes out because it was such a great, tragic scene. For my little heart, it was too much to bear. I just loved Akela so much, and I didn't want him to die. But I knew that he was dying for a good cause. I'm not exactly sure, actually. I should revisit The Jungle Book and read the story as an adult, because I cannot remember a lot of it. And I know that the Soviet version might have changed some things a little bit, perhaps, but I think they kept the essence of it. Here is the final scene when Mowgli... actually not the final, one of the last scenes where Mowgli is deciding to join the people once again, and he's crying to Baloo. And that also was so touching to me, and I highly recommend this cartoon. If I find it on YouTube, I'm sure they had translated it and dubbed it in English, and dubbed it into English, because it was a masterpiece, honestly. The way it was drawn was so beautiful. And I know that my taste may not be the same with everyone else. And I do appreciate different illustration and drawing styles, but yeah, something about these little illustrations in some of these Soviet books really bring in something within me. So here is Carlson. And if you don't know the story, this story has been so famous. And we also had a cartoon that was drawn this way. And it was so amazing. It was so funny. It was so kind. They made some modern remakes in Russia, and they were absolutely atrocious. They were offensive to me. I did not even watch them, but I did watch some reviews, and I was so severely offended. I was like, you are just making a mockery out of our childhood. But the Soviet Carlson cartoon was so great. It was so amazing. It was so funny. And we still use quotes from this cartoon in our day-to-day speech. Look at this. This is when there were some burglars that came into the house and Carlson was pretending to be a ghost. It was full of amazing stories, and I just loved these stories so much growing up. And of course, it is kind of a creepy concept if you look at it from a modern viewpoint. Carlson is supposedly this little person living on the rooftop of a house, and he makes friends with this little boy who we called, in Russian, we called him Malыsh, which can be roughly translated as baby boy, and this is just how everybody calls him. His family, I guess, called him this because he was the youngest of the 3 children. It is kind of creepy to me as an adult, of course, that this peculiar small person was making friends with this boy, because he was allegedly older, but he's a cartoon character. He's like a fae, I guess, and this was Freaking Book. Oh my goodness, everybody loved Freaking Book. She was so funny. She was a babysitter, and she was not very kind, but in the end, she ended up being a pretty decent person, even though when she first encountered Carlson, she was very much not pleased, but then she ended up loving him and having a great relationship with him. And I think as an allegory, it works really well. It is very effective. It is effective in the sense that it's probably this boy's imaginary friend, and his babysitter was probably just playing along, if, of course, we put it in a realistic context. But as a fantasy, of course, you know, little flying men who live on rooftops can make friends with little boys, and there's nothing creepy about that. And lastly, Winnie the Pooh. Our Soviet Winnie the Pooh was so much superior to the American Winnie the Pooh, or I'm not sure what. Yeah, I think it's the red shirt, no pants Winnie the Pooh is American, I think. But our Soviet Winnie the Pooh, again, the cartoon is just a freaking masterpiece. I will be looking for all of these cartoons, and I will put the links down below if I happen to find them. Even if you just watch them in Russian, I highly recommend, just for the visuals, because it was so beautifully drawn. It was so touching. It was so good. It's just so good. You have to check it out yourself. And I just love this drawing style. Actually, the cartoon was even better than this. This is a little bit different. These illustrations take a little bit of liberty. They're not exactly the same as the cartoon, whereas the Mowgli and the Carlson pictures in this book, they're exactly the same as the cartoons were. But Winnie the Pooh is a little bit different. And y'all know Winnie the Pooh's stories because it was originally published in English. And I think that it was so great that Soviet Union wanted to introduce children to stories from all over the world. I had a ton of collections of stories from all over the world. I think I shared before the mermaid story, which was Georgian, but we also had stories translated from all languages, most languages you can imagine. The Soviet Union took the time to translate and make available to the children. And here you can see the price, by the way. So it is 3 rubles, 60 kopeiks. You guys are always pronouncing this word kind of strangely. Kopeyka is the word, kopeyki is the plural word, and it's kind of like cents. But that was not too expensive. In 1985, that was pretty cheap. I think my mother told me that at the brink of the collapse, she would receive like 150, closer to 200 almost rubles, working at a factory in a smaller town, not in a major big town. So that was pretty cheap for a book. And I am definitely going to be checking more of these old books out. I am just waiting. I'm just holding myself back before I get a little bit of money to just go into the bookstore and get as many of the Soviet books as I can, because they're just so comforting for me to read. I love the styles in which they were written. Of course, these were not written by Soviet people, but the way they were translated, I think, is pretty good as well. Of course, I did not read all of the originals, especially with Carlson, because it was written in Swedish and I don't speak Swedish, obviously. But I'm so grateful to have had all these books growing up. And again, do share your favorite childhood books if you feel comfortable. Let's start gathering this list of books to read with children, because I am really planning to start reading books with children, because I really love doing that when I was able to, and it really brought a lot of joy and enrichment to my life. And as far as I could tell, for children, it was a pretty great experience as well. And when adults read with me when I was a child, I just had the best time. That was my absolute favorite pastime before I learned to read myself. Even when I learned to read myself, I still loved listening to someone else read, especially if they would put their passion into it and read, in different voices, pretending to be different characters. I love that. And I learned to do that myself when I did it with children. So I'm going to start looking for opportunities to start readings with children. And hopefully I will be able to find some opportunities, volunteer opportunities, and maybe some children in the neighborhood. I don't know. We'll see. I will probably read in Russian with them, but I will try and possibly read in English with them as well, just to help them learn the language if this is what they desire, and to maybe expand their horizons a little bit. So I hope you have a great day today. Do take care of yourself and your community. Consider supporting me on Patreon, and I'll talk to you sometime later.